I'm happy to call the meeting to order, and we'll just feed Dan in when he gets here. So why don't we do a roll call? Scott?
Here.
Linda?
Here.
Peter here. We've received a note from Erin that she won't be joining us, and we expect Dan to join us shortly. That's 3 out of 5, so that would be a quorum. Does anyone want to volunteer to do the minutes for today's meeting?
I've been doing them. Someone just needs to review them.
Okay. Do we have a volunteer to review?
I'll review.
Okay, thank you. And then we have the minutes from June 10th available if to vote. Do we have a motion to approve the June 10th Land Use and Planning Subcommittee minutes?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Peter, aye. Linda?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
All right. Okay. All right. The other items on the agenda, I'll just go through and read them for our for folks who are joining the meeting. So identify gaps and information needed for us to proceed with the project and to create the zoning and land use strategy, move it forward. Discuss updates on project phasing, disposition of the site, funding for fiscal year 2026, and discuss recommendations for including in preferred uses for the site. And then public comment and recap and adjournment. So happy to jump in with identifying gaps in the information needed. I think all of us sort of know this intuitively, like what's the timing for the Route 2 rotary rework, I think is huge, as we've all learned. Any other equally momentous information gaps?
I got a question, Peter. Do we ever receive a final copy of the study after agency made their edits?
No, I believe that we're going to be voting on that as a full committee at our August 4th meeting.
Voting on what?
Actually, if anyone wants to correct me, so the agency report, we made a couple of suggested edits, and I think maybe we voted to approve it. And then it was going to be, I think we decided to wait to put it on the MCI website until we all had a chance to look at it again. Shanna?
So Megan and I met with the agency last week to send them some of the suggested corrections that the advisory board had, and they are to send it back to us by the end of this week. And then we will get it posted far and wide online. And the community outreach subcommittee met on Friday, and they are looking to schedule like a scoping call with agency to discuss next steps for a possible contract extension.
Okay. Thank you. Well, so great question, Scott.
Thank you. I was just curious where it was.
As were we all.
Okay.
Okay. Other information that we need. I think Linda did a great job with sort of trying to identify funding sources. You want to dig into that a little bit more and add your thoughts?
Well, I think from the agency report, they had indicated that they thought it would be valuable to have an ecological assessment of the site. I don't believe.
Can't hear Linda very well.
In the agency report, they recommended that we have an ecological assessment of the site, but they didn't detail what that they meant by that. And they also recommended an environmental assessment of the site, again, without going into any depth as to what that would require. And I don't know if they just didn't have full information of what DCAM was doing or what was going on at the wastewater treatment site in terms of any studies. So I think there's some areas that we may want to study, but that we really don't have enough understanding to really outline them today, from what I could see.
Yeah, I think we're sort of beginning to encounter the brownfield issues and the landowner DCAM's sort of reluctance to go too far with that. And there's also, I think I think they're planning to have the brownfield assessment be done by whoever the bidder is for the site, when they go out to bid for it. And so the question we might bat around is it financially, sound use of town money to hire someone to do the 21E brownfield site assessment that DCAM has done, but to a greater degree, just so that we can look at it, if we aren't going to be purchasing it, and that it's going to a third party. I think if the town is going to do the wastewater treatment plant, that's a legitimate use of funds for that portion of the site. But
Peter,
I'm happy for discussions on this. I see Dan has joined us. Welcome, Dan.
yes, sorry. So let me put my camera on. So just a reaction to that. I would, if that's the direction we want to go, I would encourage us to consult with town council, because that opens up a whole lot of liability for the town and its relationship with DCAM and otherwise. So I don't know, I understand why we might want to understand that. And at the same time, that's a really loaded topic.
Peter?
Yes, Scott.
I don't really understand the purpose of us investing in that when we're really handing it off to DCAM, and what are we gonna do with that information? They're gonna go a different direction. It's in their hands.
Mm-hmm.
If they're gonna wait for the developer, which surprises me, I would think they'd want to know ahead of time leading up to that deal making, but I didn't know that was their tact.
Well, it may not be, but I think the way they've been holding some of that information close to their vest, I think it's a negotiating point with whoever they end up.
What would be the benefit of Concord understanding what's
it would be beneficial to us if we were going to purchase it.
Right.
But if we aren't, then I think we leave it well enough alone, or only investigate those portions which we might acquire. Dan had his hand up and Linda had her hand up, I believe.
I'm all set. Sorry.
Okay.
I guess my only question is.
I
if
can't hear
I
Linda
can't
though.
hear
I will say
Linda
that.
either.
Work on my technology and I'll get back to you. Yeah.
Hey, Dan, you joined us in the part of the agenda where we're looking at information gaps. So we talked about, Route 2 Rotary. Linda pointed out that agency said there might need to be an ecological assessment as well as an environmental assessment, which led to the discussion of the 21E study that we just sort of, and brownfields issues that we just touched on.
Thank you, Peter.
Do we need any of those studies for our zoning purposes?
Possibly not. Dan?
Well, yeah, sorry. So, so this is fresh off of the, I think everybody knows that I'm trying to connect with everybody. So I was a couple of minutes late because I was talking to Elizabeth Akers more. And she did make the point, and I think Linda, you may have alluded to this too in your memo, that and I don't want to get the descriptor wrong, and I will if I attempt to say it, but there's a section in there, I think it's on the page 93, that talks about this sort of ecological and historical and just sort of what this place might want to be. And it's in the sort of crafting of our vision for it and story. There may be some additional work that would benefit from that. That could be an area, at least from her perspective, and I think a little bit from what Linda's wrote, that we may want to delve into a little bit deeper.
Right, we were just talking, Linda had mentioned that they didn't really give a very solid definition of the ecological assessment in the report. So unless it was in one of the multitudes of appendices.
Yeah, and where I was going was sort of reacting to what you said, Peter, that this is that it may, if the town decides that it wants to be more of an open space or more of a kind of a historical or institutional kind of use, then that would, it seems to me, that could affect how we what we propose for zoning.
Mhm.
So that's why I think that may need to be a little better understood.
Right. And other information gaps, I think, would be phasing and possible thresholds that we might want to put in place, such as, just an example, you can't build like a big retail component until the Route 2 Rotary thing has been decided and laid out, or things like that, in terms of phasing and such. And that, not necessarily through zoning, but through a development agreement, might be a way to handle something like that.
Do we have control of the development agreement though?
Well, we have the ability to influence the development agreement, and that's part of our job, is to identify, at least as I understand, part of our job is to identify strategies we can ask the town to work with DCAM to deploy to better protect the town's interests going forward. Other thoughts around information gap? Scott?
Wastewater treatment, has there been any discussion? I mean, I know it's still evolving and we're trying to understand the actual cost of refurbishing and renovating to the standards of Concord and MCI. But is there a thought about incorporating that into the development agreement of their responsibility for the cost of that? So Concord is not burdened by a extravagant amount of money to rebuild that.
I think that's a great issue for the town to get more information on. And, you know, I think it requires some lateral communication with our friends at Public Works and the Select Board around that issue. So we're all on the same page.
They're what they call linkage. I mean, it's like you're linking, you as a developer coming in, you're gonna be responsible for some of the renovation of the wastewater treatment facility because you're gonna be using it. A good portion of it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. You know, when I was up in New Hampshire, we would call that a development impact fee. You pay your proportional fair share.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I'm on the land use working group, as you know,
Mhm.
and we have a lot of other big needs, immediate needs, and I'm just trying to lessen the burden on the town as much as possible, especially on this site. So
Yeah, that's great. We appreciate that, Scott.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, we may want to come back to that if we have time, just so Scott can have some clarity. So questions did come up, clarity in terms of what I think it would be our land use subcommittee, would want to be, him to be conveying. So like I said, maybe we'll come back to it, but.
Any more on information gaps? Otherwise, the next agenda topic would be to discuss updates on project phasing, disposition of the site, and funding for the fiscal year. Project phasing. So
what do you mean by the developer that is selected in terms of the phasing of the construction or the phasing of our role in this process? What do you mean by phasing?
I'm thinking more of timing for when the sort of trying to link the developers' initial phases to timing that makes sense for the community. So, I mean, right now, if we go into went out to develop the site tomorrow, the market's really hot for housing, right? So that might be an initial phase. And as I was discussing with Dan yesterday, there's so much uncertainty around federal funding for what used to be Massachusetts' real economic drivers like clean energy and biomedical stuff, that it would be hard to try and lock in those type of uses right now when we don't really know, what their fate may be for another 2 or 3 years. So those are types of
A little bit of
things.
it's a challenge because I can see us zoning it and then we can look at the zoning and look at the uses and say, this makes sense to go first based on Route 2 rotary not being complete and all that.
Mhm.
But that's gotta be scripted into the development RFP language and contract with the developer, but the developer, if the developer's handcuffed with timing,
Yeah.
it might make it less attractive for that developer. There's too much risk if they can't build out on their time frame.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Scott. I mean, I'm just trying to think this through out loud. So,
Yeah.
Dan has his hand up.
Under the same heading as project phasing, maybe there's maybe this is the overarching comment on it that captures it, but just disposition, when sort of thinking it through from the town's perspective, when would we theoretically be in a position to feel comfortable going forward and trying to negotiate, you know, what are the things that we need? And you just made a list of the information gaps. That's part of it. I will also point out that previously, when we made the list at the last meeting, I think we mentioned state's liability extent as another information
Mhm.
gap item. I'm not quite, you know, maybe it's captured in some of the other ones, but I just, when I was quickly reading my notes, I saw that. And so this disposition, this idea of, you know, we're theoretically going to be, we have to, well, not theoretically, we have to give the select board an update in the next meeting or two, quarterly update. And, you know, we should begin to think about, or maybe queue up for them, how long do these different steps take, you know, to coalesce around a preferred scenario, to feel comfortable that we've adequately reached out to the community and have some consensus around that, to, you know, beginning to understand to a degree that we can feel comfortable with and is realistic around these big unknowns of Route 2 improvements and wastewater treatment, you know, so sewer and access, you know, those kind of, just looking at a visual of that and trying to understand the relationships between them. And then also be in a position to press back against DCAM, which seems to be getting increasingly eager to make sure this doesn't lose any momentum. So I think that understanding could be really useful to
Mhm.
us, both as a town and a board, to be able to point to something and say, well, there's a logic to what we're doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Dan. Thanks for bringing that up. The disposition strategy makes a ton of sense. Scott?
Dan, when would you envision when should we collectively as a group work on that conceptual sort of schedule leading up to disposition? Is that something we talk about on Monday?
It's
Or-
an excellent question, Scott, and I was hoping, but I've been enlightened or illuminated. I was hoping in the last conversation Patrick and I had, and maybe Peter was there too, I can't remember. We when we were talking with the agency right before wrapping it up, we talked about them potentially generating a phasing plan, which would contemplate a lot of what I just discussed, but even more. And I've learned subsequently from Megan and I think Shannon that they can do it but their contract is up, and so we need to fund them to do that. So I'm sorry, that's a long answer. That's a long sort of tangential answer, but I think we could collectively try to do that. You know, it would be we could brainstorm in I would be, tell me what you think about this. I'm thinking live right now on this, but maybe what we could do is, as a group, I think it would be really helpful to have all the parties just carve out a half an hour or 20 minutes and brainstorm what we think all the items are. I could listen to that. I could take it, and like I did at the beginning of our engagement, I could turn that into a, you know, Microsoft project or schedule. If
I have an idea. We
Okay.
do. The way we sort of brainstorm scheduling is we get everybody together and you get sticky pads. And you get a board and you put everything that we need to do between now and disposition. And we sort of put it in order, and then we can sort of put a sequence to it. As a group, sort of collectively, so, and then we could put this, you know, you could rough out a draft sort of phasing, scheduling off of that thought process. Just an idea.
I think it's an awesome idea. If Peter, what do you think about that? And Linda?
Makes sense.
Linda, you're still muted and you're frozen.
No, she's not frozen, but we're just
No, now
missing her
she's-
voice.
So can you give us a thumbs up or thumbs? Okay, thank you. So, all right, so I can put that, and Shannon's on the call, so we can add that to one of the items that we'll deal with on the
Yeah.
floor.
like a half an hour of just,
Yeah, I love that
Um,
idea, Scott. And honestly, I think I can imagine that as being a really, especially after the conversations I'm having with everybody, a really good moment for people to voice whatever it is they're concerned about and to help us understand their thought process.
it's a really interactive process and it allows people to move things around and add ideas. It's very constructive.
Would you be interested in facilitating it, or I could do it with you,
Also,
or?
I can, we can do it together,
Yeah, okay. So what we'll need, Shannon, is just
the board, a
some
big wall.
stickies. Yeah, wall and stickies.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't feel like you have to build an addition to town hall in order for us to do it.
But the air conditioning has to be working.
But
Just kidding.
I'm gonna be at CMLP for the.
That would be good, I think.
Excellent. Great interaction there. Thank you, Scott and Dan, for volunteering to help lead us through that. I had one question just sort of lingering from the agency report and uses, and this is sort of an aside, but I had heard from a number of people in the community that there was interest in turning the warden's house into a potential hotel, sort of Liberty Hotel too. And I didn't see that anywhere. And I wondered if there was a reason why it was sort of dropped or not, because that's likely to be a question we might get as we go back out to the community. Anybody see anything along those lines?
It's a great idea to think about. It's a wonderful usage. I just don't know how big that building is and whether the rooms count would pencil out with all the work that needs to be done in there. But it's a great idea.
Yeah, I sort of saw it as being sort of the front and then attached in back.
Oh, I get, kind of like the Liberty Hotel. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
But yeah, I know the community sort of generated it, and I was just sort of wondering where it disappeared to, or why it disappeared from the report. So, all right, just wanted to surface that. You gonna try again, Linda?
How do we get that? It's a great idea, but how do we get it in a report, just in sort of some documentation that we've thought about this?
Yeah, well, the minutes will help. And we can bring it up again with folks. And if we reconnect with agency, we can just ask them directly, or that could be one of the questions that we touch base with them on. All right. So funding for fiscal year 2026, any updates on that for the group? I think we all went to town meeting and have listened to the IRA funds being set aside and such. So I know we've got some funds available. Any further update, or maybe we just have that addressed on Monday with the full committee?
Monday would be good.
Okay. All right. Next item would be recommendations for including in preferred uses on the site. So housing, a component that's affordable, workforce, and senior. I think most of the recommendations basically had 50% senior housing to try and address the school issue. Thought that was reasonable, but probably requires more discussion with the full group. Oh, you're connecting to audio, Linda. Are you there? Oh, no, darn. Well, a thoughtful voice is absent from the table.
Linda, it's not nearly as much fun when we can't hear you.
Yeah,
How about can she use her cell phone?
Yeah, Linda, I sent you the phone number to call in email.
so along other preferred uses, I mean, I'd still think, you know, hotel, boutique hotel, something would be a welcome use.
Peter, I got.
Yes,
When we can talk on Monday, but we as a group, as the advisory board, I think we have to really discuss the three scenarios and talk about what you're just talking about, what we ideally see. I mean, I think we're gonna have to come to a resolution as a group of kind of encapsulate the vision we think the town of Concord wants and we want. And that's doable from a development standpoint. So we'll come up with a schedule on that and when we have to have that sort of, what's that deadline and what's gonna take to get there and how much more public input do we need and all that stuff.
okay, it's great. I think that's certainly legitimate to shift to the Monday fuller group discussion as you're suggesting, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just raise a question on that? Sorry. I mean, I kind of agree with that approach. And maybe I missed something that you just said, but I think my impression was when we left our meeting on Monday last time, we were going to make recommendation. We as a land use committee were going to try to make recommendations for the whole advisory board to consider in terms of which or what components or which scenario maybe make the most sense. Did
Oh, I
I?
mean, this subcommittee was gonna make a recommendation to the advisory board?
That's what I
Yeah.
thought we were going
Alright,
to
Peter.
try to attempt to do and then see if people could coalesce around it. I will tell you in 4 conversations does not make even a quorum. But so far, I haven't heard from anybody saying that a particular, I didn't put that question directly to them, but the general feedback among the people I've spoken with is, we have 3 scenarios and, maybe we would want to pick and choose among them and come up with a hybrid. That's about as much consensus as I think I've heard. So it's just,
Mhm.
and I don't know, if we're prepared to do this today, or I just throw that out because that was what I understood was going to happen.
Sure. Well, I think we have a lot of investment in mixed use and trying to diversify the tax base along with the housing component. So it's just a question of the percentages and amounts there. And there was light manufacturing, which might be a good reuse of some of the existing buildings from the agency report. So, Dan?
The thing that I get hung up on, Peter, about the housing number or whatever is that I personally don't believe that all density is created equally. And what might be helpful based on things I've heard from different members over of several months is trying to figure out, what is give people some different precedents, which again, agency was supposed to help us with, visual preferences to sort of consider and back into the density that way. because I don't know, personally, I don't know how you answer that question without um, uh, thinking of it visually, thinking of the overall vision for the project. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I think they went part way with some of the density things. So I mean, it's like there's one scenario which has a density which says this is somewhat similar to Concord Green, and then there's another component which is the Riverside Apartments along the Assabet, which was a much higher density. It's a much smaller project, you know, and they said this is more like what we might consider for another thing. So I think taking a look at some of those and maybe fleshing that out, but talking more along like the Concord Green with a couple more units density is where, after reading things, that sort of is where I'm sort of headed. But we need to all be on the same page and have
Was that closer, was that closer to phase 2 or phase 3?
Ah,
I
so
mean,
that's
I mean, scenario 2 or 3.
I think it was between two, it's like just about 2.
Yeah.
Maybe 2.5 or
Yeah.
2.25, something
Yeah,
like
that's,
that.
that's where I see it ending up somewhere in there.
Yeah. All right.
Is it,
Shannon, do you unmute Linda's phone if that's her phone there?
Yeah, it is. She should be able to unmute herself. I just pressed a button that says ask to unmute.
Okay.
I'm here.
Yay.
I'm here. Yes, I've missed everything, but I'm here. Thanks.
Okay, good. Did you have any thoughts on the preferred uses discussion that we're mulling around here?
No, I think I'll maybe summarize them if I have them once I listen to the replay of what you all have said. I don't want to.
Okay, we're just, you know, just for context and for the community folks listening, there's still going to be a good swath of open space. We have the 200-foot riverfront setback that can't really be built in terms of any type of larger project other than where there's existing facilities such as a portion of the wastewater treatment plant and the like. And there's also all of the agency scenarios have talked about the importance of interconnected trails connecting to West Concord and the rail trail and over to Jarrow Park and such. So there's an undergirdment of open space, which is sort of runs throughout all of the scenarios. Housing runs throughout all the scenarios, and there's a question of density that the group is going to be looking at. There's a need for reusing some of our historical resources and trying to figure out how to do that appropriately. I know there were a number of comments around sort of teeing up a couple of the warden's house, admin building, and the White House, so that whoever the developer is can decide whether or not they want to have them on the National Register and then go after the tax credits that might or might not still be available under the Trump administration. To aid with redevelopment and rehabilitation of those buildings. So there are areas out there where there might be some funding sources. I know a number of the funding sources, Linda, that you ticked off, like 80% of those programs have been axed by the current administration. Anything that has
Got
to
it.
do with civil rights and such is like being written off the books. From my National Park Service insiders have been telling me that, which is really sad.
Mhm.
But you know, there are still those you know, hidden home runs out there. I don't really see universities making large investments in offsite material, given offsite properties, given the current administration's proclivity to go on the attack against education. But I am more than willing to be wrong. I would love to have a big user that wants to, you know, control a site in such a wonderful location, enter into discussions with DCAM and the town about the entire site. But I think we need to just sort of be open to that, but also be cognizant of the strange economic times in which we find ourselves.
Mhm. True.
All right, other thoughts on uses here, folks? So, Scott?
Just looking at the plans, I just want to make sure, you know, I was looking at Winthrop Street, and I don't think we want to have a lot of cars going there to get to the retail or to the institutional, and I don't know how you can, so it's not a cut through. And I don't know if it's, I know I'm getting in the micro right now, but in terms of just laying out the site and stuff, do we want to be careful about, like, so does that make sense at all? If you're, because otherwise you could cut through there and you could get to the retail on the front or the institutional on the front or whatever uses on the front.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly things where it might be looked at as residents only, or
I just want to, I sort of want to nip it now, so we,
yeah.
in terms of before any kind of community input.
You know, the fire department's certainly going to insist on, you know, a couple of means of ingress and egress. Good traffic layout's going to sort of, you know, sort of maybe we're going to have to figure out where the right point along Commonwealth Ave is to have an intersection, so that it's not going to be making a quick left-hand turn right across the bike lane on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, which would be awful, awfully dangerous for both.
Okay,
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to have to deal with.
I have to deal with it's micro, I know right now, so.
Yeah, but I think the approach you highlighted is really important. We have to be very careful and work with the community to try and minimize the traffic impact on the existing neighborhood.
Is that something that we need to define in the preferred scenario, or is that something that really is more of a zoning issue?
Well, that's more street layout. I don't think it's particularly zoning, but it could be, because if it's going to be a town street, we might have some controls over it through the select board. And you know, the site layout, I think we can say where a preferred intersection location is, and I think that would be, you know, a smart thing for us as the MCI advisory board to do, to try and set up locations that will have minimal conflicts for traffic. But just recognize we don't control the state, and it's hard to do river crossings. So we'll we got some constraints on us, but we also have to look out for, the community's interests. All right. It's all right if I ask Carlin Reed for her comment? Carlin?
Thank you. Carlin Reed, 83 Woods End, member of the Finance Committee, but speaking on my own behalf, this is a question really for Scott. Yesterday, the Land Use Working Group had a site visit. And Scott, I understand you're the representative from MCI. How did that go? What do you have to report?
That was very helpful, very educational. We got a great tour of DPW site, Highs Road, as well as the police and fire stations. I was only able to attend the police and fire station tour on Walden Street, not the one in West Concord. But we spent a lot of time there and really saw the actual immediate needs and of all these departments in town and deficiencies of their facilities for safety and effectiveness. So there's some major constraints and major potential future capital projects that Concord is going to have to embark on sooner than later to ensure that we keep our people safe and happy and the town functions effectively. So I mean, there was a lot of surprises when I walked through those buildings. I was really surprised at the state of those buildings and what those people have to work with.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the question, Carlin. All right, any other, it's all right with the board? It sounds like we're pushing a lot of things to Monday. We do have some thoughts about preferred uses for the site. We talked about the fact that there will be a significant amount of open space in any of the scenarios. We talked about the need for housing and trying to come up with the right density. We've talked about the need for a portion of the housing to be senior housing. We talked about the need for a portion to be workforce and affordable. And we discussed coming up with mixed use light industrial components that could be deployed on the house, on the property. So there are a number of different uses. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I think we're finding a hybrid blend. I think we're sort of deciding on, and I'm just curious. It all depends on the market too, but we have institutional thoughts. We also have retail thoughts. We also have hospitality thoughts.
Yeah.
We forgot the retail and grocery store if necessary, or any kind of small business retail. And what's that mix? What are we thinking? How much institutional, versus how much retail, how much hospitality? And then you're bouncing that out with the recreation and things like that. And obviously housing comes first because that's what sort of DCAM's charge is, to build more housing in Massachusetts. So I don't know what that mix is of retail, institutional, and hospitality, and that's something we should discuss. I just don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
That can work or not work. So it's really how we do it. We have to really make sure we do it right.
Right. That was a good summary and good additions. Thank you. Any other thoughts on this before we open it up to the public? Dan?
In my conversation with Elizabeth, and I believe she's mentioned this in previous meetings, I think she's of the mind that if we could find a partner, whether it's an institutional partner, as Scott was mentioning, or a developer partner, or even a wealthy individual that had a particular vision in mind for a use on the site, how would that alter our approach to things? I'm not necessarily looking for an answer in this moment, but does it, only to the degree does it need to be somehow captured in our preferred use discussion? And if you think it does, Peter, should we, as a group, talk about it a little bit, or should we wait to see if it arises?
I think I think it might be worthwhile discussing. I think that's what I was trying to get at a little bit earlier with my ramble about institutional users or universities. So I think we just have to look at a suite of uses that would allow for that to occur. But I think that suite is also going to need to include housing no matter what, because the property owner won't sell the property unless there's a housing component to it. So we can say housing plus, a big user that could be institutional, retail, light industrial, or hospitality that would cover the balance of the site. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it occurs to me that were we to decide as a full committee, a full board, that's a direction we wanted to go in, that almost feels like a different channel of a disposition strategy or a unique path, because it's probably has a different timeline and a different set of tasks associated with it, but I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know that
Yeah,
there's an
that's
action.
what we're doing, and that's one of the reasons we're meeting together, because we're pretty boring when we talk in the mirror. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like identifying an institutional user or some sort of central use that sort of benefits Concord that we could identify, but I think with DCAM and their procurement and the state procurement laws, I don't know how we pencil out, how we carve out that if DCAM's trying to, who's gonna pay for the cleanup? I mean, is that now Concord's? Are we, for carving something out, we have to, it's a bid, you have to go through a bid process with the developers, and the developer, I think it comes down to what we say in our zoning, but also in the what we're, the instructions and the details for the developer, what we're expecting. We're expecting an institutional user that is providing workforce development for certain types of people. I mean, it has to be, how specific do we get? Like in our wishes.
Yeah, part of that's going to be negotiation with DCAM around.
Well, I think it's DCAM. I don't know if we can go out to something separate than go parallel to DCAM. I don't know.
Yeah, no, what I think I heard was rezoning the property that would allow someone to bid on it through the DCAM process, they could separate out the housing that DCAM's going to require, and then there could be a rump of the site that might be the quote institutional user that has a mix of allowed uses on the site. That would include.
And how do you? Then they're sharing in the cost of the cleanup, the demo, and the infrastructure of the entire site, correct? That one.
That's potentially there, yeah.
So not only are they building a building, but they're going to have to share their portion of the cleanup and the demo and the all the site work.
Well, I always like to leave room for a miracle to occur.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll find that to be the case, but now there's a lot of detail, as you rightly point out, that needs to be flushed through before that could move forward. All right, it's okay if we go out for public comment at this point. All right, we're open for public comment. Just say your name and address and Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Peter.
All right, thank you all.